Hey everyone, welcome to the Mobile User Acquisition Show. In the Mobile User Acquisition Show, we talk about how to use mobile user acquisition strategies to grow your app quickly and capital efficiently. The Mobile User Acquisition Show is presented by me, Shamant Rao, mobile growth leader and founder and CEO of the mobile growth consulting firm Rocketship HQ. Each episode includes strategies, tips, and pointers from the leading edge of mobile user acquisition that you can use to unlock tremendous growth for your app in a sustainable and capital efficient manner.
Our guest today is Holly Chen, growth advisor and the former global head of digital marketing at Slack. Before that, she led growth for Google Store and Google B2B websites, served as a product manager at Gucci, and had a brief stint at the UN just as well. I'm excited for this interview because we look at one of the most admired brands of the last few years. We take a closer look at how they looked at mobile marketing while accounting for the numerous complexities of B2B marketing, including longer sales cycles, multiple touch points prior to conversion, and much, much more. In the process of orienting their growth toward mobile, Slack turned around a declining mobile growth trajectory in what I think is a very, very impressive effort.
I'm very excited to welcome Holly Chen to the Mobile User Acquisition Show. Holly, very excited to have you.
Very excited to be on the show. Thank you, Shama.
Yeah, I think we've only been connected for the last couple of weeks, but the couple of times that we've spoken, I've very much enjoyed both the humor that you brought to everything you do, humor and happiness you bring to everything you do, but also just the sheer depth and insight you bring to a lot of the work you've done. And for all of those reasons, I'm excited to dive into our interview today.
Yeah, I know you're a humor type as well. So, like humors like humors.
Yes.
That's
Indeed.
why we get along.
Indeed. Yeah. Cool. Holly, we're going to talk about a lot of your work at Slack and specifically how you guys worked with mobile, how you guys really oriented a lot of your marketing towards mobile. To take a 10,000 foot view, how does mobile fit into a buyer's journey at Slack? How did you and your team identify this?
Yeah, great question. So mobile typically almost is adopted child in a lot of B2B products. So at Slack, we saw this from both the macro perspective and the local perspective. So from the macro level, we understood, especially in recent years, mobile has been more and more important for a B2B user journey and purchase decision process. Especially there were new reports and research that came out and says about 70% of the buyers under 40 years old and 50% of buyers over 40 years old use mobile before buying a B2B product. And that's more than half of users use mobile to do their research. And then in terms of B2B queries, so people who look for B2B type of products, 50% now is made on mobile. And there's an estimate to say like about 80% will be made this year or next year. So mobile is increasingly more and more important in the B2B purchase funnel, but we know very little about it. And we observe that mobile can accelerate the time to purchase. There were research saying that it can accelerate up to 20 to 30%. We know intuitively mobile is very important. People are on their mobile all the time, and especially for decision makers who use mobile a lot as they commute, pre-COVID. And but like at the same time, we also recognize there's a lot of challenges in mobile, especially for B2B, because typically the traffic is a lower volume. in comparison to desktop. Typically for B2B, we see about only 10 to 20% of overall traffic was on mobile platforms, and even a lower percentage for conversions. And typically the quality of a mobile traffic is also lower than desktop, because most of the conversions will happen on desktop, and it's also harder to measure, right? Like the mobile touch point versus a desktop touch point, oftentimes is hard to connect the dots. So that's the macro level. We understand there's opportunities, but also risks. And then on the local level at Slack, around 2017, we saw that the new team creation from mobile declined. But at the same time, our desktop team creation experienced really high growth rate. So we thought, oh, well, this is not necessarily normal. We were expecting, if the market demand was increasing, both channels should be increasing instead of one increase and one declining. We also knew that the mobile teams showed lower lifetime value, and we understood that the mobile products was also resource constrained. So there's a lot of reasons why we didn't do mobile earlier, but at the same time we were also doing a lot of research about lifetime value and understanding the user journey better. So what we found was for a team creator that created a team on desktop, and if they have a mobile usage, their lifetime value is 5 to 10x more than just having one touch points, one platform within their life cycle. So we knew that this is very important, and potentially what we want to explore, not only mobile acquisition, but also thinking through mobile's role in the lifetime of the user journey.
Right. So clearly you guys saw that at a macro level, B2B buyers are using mobile, which makes sense because broadly everyone's using mobile. And I will also say Slack, when I think about it, it doesn't come to mind as a B2B product, but it absolutely is one, right? So you're like, right, in the broader world, more and more B2B people are using mobile. And with Slack specifically, you're like, hey, mobile isn't growing, and why is it? It's not because people aren't using mobile. And if anything, mobile users are more valuable. So you're like, look, where is the disconnect? So that sounds like that's how you guys were thinking about it. Right?
Exactly, yep.
And once you guys noticed this disconnect in terms of how valuable mobile users were and how much it was growing, which I imagine reflected how much you were investing in marketing mobile and promoting mobile to your users. What were some of the first steps you guys took when you said, right, we think mobile could benefit from more marketing investment / effort? What were some of the first things you guys did?
Absolutely. I would say the first thing is to have a realistic and holistic perspective around the role of mobile and this exploration. Because to be honest, we still don't know the value of mobile for B2B in general, for Slack especially, because as you said, it's a B2B product. It's also prosumer. So the user behavior could be different from a normal, like a consumer, and it could also be different from a traditional enterprise buyer profile. So we didn't know exactly what would happen. And two is the cross-channel impact. We still need to understand better. But we did know that for example, from mobile search perspective, we were doing a lot of desktop, brand search or like non-brand search, but on mobile, we weren't doing anything. So we, like a lot of competitors were also bidding on Slack keywords. We say, okay, like at least from the brand defense perspective, we need to start doing something. And more broadly, how can we use mobile more effectively as a channel? So we first listed all the unknown questions that we don't have answers for. are. So for example, should we drive the traffic, mobile traffic to a mobile web landing page or directly to the app store, right? Like for a gaming or e-commerce app, it's very like typically it's better to drive to the app store, but for B2B products, is it better to lead to a landing page where people can learn your product more and educate them more, and then they would have a higher conversion rate? Like these are all hypotheses and assumptions. We have no idea that whether they would work. Or things like, oh, how would organic search works with paid search, or like which MMP should we pick? So all of like first lay down all the unknown questions we wanted to answer, and secondly define success metrics. What do we want to achieve from this program? So what we determined was we do want to drive top line growth with mobile acquisition channels, but with a realistic CPA for this effort. So determining the goal for the program is the second and very critical for us to align the team's effort. I would say step 3 is to get buy-in and cross-functional support. Very important to get executive buy-in and setting expectations and communicate what we want to achieve. But also mobile is something that cannot be done in silos. Mobile engineering, data engineering, growth product, growth engineering, analytics, IT, finance, privacy. So all of those teams play very critical roles in making this program successful. So really getting everyone on the same page and understanding the value and the purpose of the program.
Even though you guys looked at mobile as a key new initiative, mobile wasn't siloed, as you said, right? Because the mobile product is intertwined with the desktop product. It is the same product. Which is wholly unlike a lot of mobile app companies. If you're a game, you don't have to worry about the dependency on desktop. So I imagine there were a lot of interdependencies that you guys had to be very cognizant of.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just from user experience perspective, how our messaging is working for mobile versus desktop. Is it the same? Are we emphasizing the value of having multiple devices and you can check things at different places and on the go? So starting from messaging to creatives, to targeting, to measuring, all of those are very cross-functional.
Yeah. Right. And you did say that one of the key components was to understand what success metrics are. And you're like, look, that has to be top line growth. And yet, I imagine one of the key challenges was to attribute top line growth to mobile per se. Right. And can you speak to some of the challenges involved in essentially attributing top line growth or outcomes to the effort and investment you guys were making into mobile?
Yeah, for sure. One of the key challenges for mobile is the difficulty to connect all the touch points in cross device until the conversion and the activation. So there are two things. One is multi-touch attribution for cross-device, which I can talk more about. And two is actually for the program, our goal also, we revisit it every 3 months and 6 months and to see the impact of it. So initially, our goal is to drive top line volume. So like a pure number of top line conversions from mobile. But then as the program goes on, we looked into the conversion rate for quality conversions. And we define quality conversions as potentially teams that are either more likely to activate or more likely to engage over time to upgrade to paid. And then the goal of the mobile also went into driving more activation, monetization, and optimize for cross-device business impact. So the program itself didn't stay stagnant, and the goal also changed over time based on the business goals.
Right. And you said one of the solutions was just multi-touch attribution, just figuring out how users interact with different touch points prior to conversion. Can you tell us a little bit more about what multi-touch attribution is for people who are not super familiar with it? And at a high level, how does it work? What happens and how is it different?
Yeah, multi-touch attribution typically refers to understanding the different touch points and their role in a conversion funnel, and properly give credits to each of these different touch points. And typically it is discussed in the context of last touch attribution, which gives 100% of the credit to a last touch point before a conversion. So if someone first look at a display banner and then did an organic search and they converted on organic search, that touch point will get 100% of the credit if you are using last touch, versus in multi-touch, you also take into account of that impressions from that first display banner.
Sure. And as you were saying earlier, you did notice there were a lot of mobile touch points that were perhaps enabling the final conversion that weren't reflecting in the earlier last touch model, right? So once you decide, okay, we think we need to have a more multi-touch approach, what was sort of the high-level approach to rolling this out? Was it like, right, today we are last touch, tomorrow we're going to just go have weights assigned to each touch point? Was it overnight? Can you tell us more about what that transition phase was like?
Yeah. Multi-touch is really important, especially for a B2B product, because the conversion window is longer. People do need more information and more education over time before they can convert, rather than something like an impulse buy or a smaller ticket item like e-commerce or mobile, where a lot of the purchase happens much more closer to the last touch. B2B products typically requires users to look at your website or watch videos, or potentially even go to some of your events before they can make a big purchase item. For Slack in particular, that window is shorter comparing to a traditional big enterprise product, because we're bottoms up and a freemium model, but we still observe a large, notable percentage of users convert outside of the 30-day window, and on average, there are multiple touch points, and actually, according to some of our research, 10 plus touch points before someone converts. So we understand that just touch points both on mobile and on desktop is important in that journey. The easiest way to start looking at this is to look at your Google Analytics report. There are, path to conversion report, and there's multi-funnel report. There's also, Google also have the attribution model comparison tool, which we found really helpful to initially validate some of our assumptions. So once looking at this like existing data points and historical data, and that confirmed our hypothesis of the direction we wanted to go, and then we looked into a lot of the research and started implementing.
Right. And so it sounds like if a company is trying to figure out, hey, is this right for us? Perhaps that's where they should be going, Google Analytics, to see, do they even have multiple touch points? Is this something that they should even be thinking about or not?
Yeah, like looking at your GA report and just see like how your existing users behave. And two, you probably have a internal data warehouse that on the log level see the user journey of your converted users. So that's another level of analysis you can do with your own internal data to look at, well, if we apply to the multi-touch attribution model, what's the impact, and what percentage of our users actually were exposed to other touch points before.
Yeah, and with mobile, you're getting a lot of the acquisition data in your MMP, and with desktop, I imagine a lot of it comes into your analytics, or perhaps Google Analytics or your internal analytics. To the extent you're comfortable sharing, can you speak to what sort of infrastructure had to be in place to capture these disparate sources of data?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So first of all, in order to do a multi-touch, you need to have raw touch points, raw data about all the touch points that you have. And we'd explore various different ways, and then we actually explored some of the out-of-the-box attribution model vendors. But what we found that the walled garden is becoming smaller and smaller and then tighter. And it's harder and harder to use a black box attribution model outside of our internal data warehouse. So what we did was to use our ad server to capture the raw data points. So for desktop, we used the DoubleClick suite, our DCM as the ad server. And then for mobile touchpoints, we used our MMP, and both of them send raw data points to our internal data warehouse. And then using email addresses, we connect the dots between the converted users in order to apply the MTV model on top of it.
Right. So the email addresses formed the unique identifier you needed to be able to know who this user is.
Exactly.
Which I imagine is the most important part, because if you're not clear about whether this is a unique user, then a lot of the marketing can go awry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say different companies may have different unique identifier. For us, email is part of the registration process.
Yes.
So it's the easiest way for us to connect the dots.
Certainly. And even as you describe it, I recognize it seems so incredibly complex. Just thinking about a lot of how the multi-touch attribution can work. So I would imagine that it comes with some amount of risk, because if you're saying touch 1, touch 2, touch 3 is 33, 33, 33, or you could make it 50, 25, 25, those can lead to very different budgeting decisions. So how did you think about mitigating the risks of incorrect decisioning around multi-touch attribution?
Really good question. So multi-touch attribution is not perfect. It is one of the approaches to measure effectiveness of marketing, and sometimes MTA can be arbitrary. So I would recommend combining MTA with incrementality studies and really understand the incremental and true value of your touch points. Ideally, you can run incrementality studies by channel. So you know the incremental value by channel, and new methodologies like ghost ads that came out in the recent years, so that you can set up to understand some of the more mid-funnel and upper funnel channels and their impact. So combining MTA and incrementality studies and incorporate the findings of incrementality studies into the MTA model is one of the core, I think, methodologies that we need to do. And two is compare your pre-post and continue to monitor via GA and other tools to make sure you're not like too far off with your efforts. And thirdly is to revisit your model and how it works I would recommend like 6 months or 12 months because your user composition and behavior may change, especially for a fast-growing company like Slack. Our users' preferences or their behavior could be changing very fast every 6 months or 12 months. So as marketers, we need to be nimble to adjust our approaches.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's a useful reminder for marketers to keep revisiting the models and backtest them. I'm reminded of one of the episodes of this podcast where we were talking about the daily deal space back in 2011, 2012.
Yep.
This is Adam Lovallo, who also hosts MAU.
Yeah, Adam's great.
Adam's great. He used to work at Living Social, which was a daily deals company. And he told me on the podcast, basically, that the first sign they saw that the daily deal space was crashing, Groupon, Living Social were going down, was when he was looking at a lot of LTV models, and he's like, oh, we projected these users were making $100 purchase, but they're making only $20. And I think that was the first sign. And I think it's a useful reminder for marketers to revisit their assumptions, to check what they are projecting, to see if it is what it is. Right? And like you said, with Slack, certainly it wasn't a question that the user quality was declining. That probably still isn't the case, but certainly user quality is changing. The user behavior is changing, and I think it certainly makes sense to revisit the model and evaluate whether your assumptions are right on that.
Yeah. It's like sometimes it's even beyond quality, because like, how do you measure quality, right? How do you define that? It's sometimes if you expand to a new vertical, right? Like people who are in, let's say, a retail vertical probably behave very different from people from a, let's say, like news agency, and how they think about the use case and the value the tool delivers is very different.
Yeah. And in most B2B marketing, those nuances are captured. That in Slack's case, because it's almost, as you said, it's a prosumer. I think that's the phrase you used. I imagine it's important to be very cognizant of some of those distinctions of how very different types of industries, different types of users behave. Right? Yeah. And also to drill into another aspect of your last answer, you spoke of incrementality. Again, to the extent you're comfortable sharing, let's assume you have 15 channels running or 10 channels or 5. Do you like say, okay, let's turn off Facebook ads for the next 2 weeks, see what happens? At a high level, is that how it works? Is that something you can speak to?
Yeah, so typically we like a DMA level incrementality tests.
Right.
Just because like pre-post sometimes is impacted by seasonality or other factors. So it may not be as accurate. So typically let's say half of the DMAs have ads and the other half doesn't have ads, and compare the results.
Cool. Yeah, that makes sense. And I think you have a fairly clear sort of segregation of your control and test group. So that definitely makes sense. Cool. Something you also spoke about earlier on in this conversation, Holly, was about how important the executive support was for this project, for the mobile project. Can you speak to what the process was of getting that executive support? Because certainly for, in very many companies with large teams that are embarking on a big project, so much hinges on executive support, even when the business case is fairly clear. So what would you say was some of the key factors that you would attribute toward getting that executive support and making sure you had it while you worked on this project?
Absolutely. I think one of the biggest learning is to start small and set clear roadmap. But remember, it always takes longer, and to first set realistic expectations on this is something that we want to test and learn, and it's not something that's gonna, it's not a silver bullet that's gonna change our landscape overnight. And 2 is to think about what to focus first. So instead of expanding to all the different channels, I think about what are the quick wins that we can show, or what are the early signals we can capture to understand if we are on in the right direction, and communicate that to the cross-functional teams and also to the executive teams. So very much bring everyone along the journey of discovery. I would say continue to optimize and adjust our approach also helped, because we're in this together, and having our executive teams and cross-functional support is critical for our success.
Yeah, right. It's so important to remember and keep sight of the larger picture, that you're working with a larger team. You guys are in this together. You're taking small steps and making progress as you go along, right? Yeah. And as you guys shifted a lot of your marketing towards mobile, I imagine just a lot of the tactical elements of marketing strategy had to change. As you mentioned, one, you had to work with an MMP, right? And that wouldn't even have been necessary when you were only on desktop. What were some of the other elements of the tactical execution or overall strategy that had to change as you guys oriented a lot more of your marketing towards mobile?
I would say mobile is still the secondary, complementary to desktop. It didn't become the major channel because desktop is still our main channel. It is still the higher quality of the two segments, and we shifted a lot of our efforts from purely top of funnel, top line growth to really understand the cross device impact. So for example, if someone downloaded a desktop and didn't have a mobile app installed, traditionally we only had email or in-app notification, and we started to experimenting what's the retargeting efforts to these new existing users. So over time, we did adjust our approach. And two is, like you said, creatives is really important. Initially, we were just using the desktop creatives and it just, resized it for our mobile. But what we found is actually a mobile native mobile first design is makes a big difference to our conversion rate. So we started experimenting, things like, you swipe up to download, or small things like that actually makes a big difference. Yeah.
And you would think a lot of that is intuitive, but again, once you're shifting from desktop, I imagine it takes some amount of stepping back and realizing that this calls for a different approach altogether.
For sure. We made our share of test hypotheses, and hypothesis didn't approve, but we really enjoyed the learning process, and it paved the way for us to scale up over time.
Indeed. And again, to the extent you're comfortable sharing, can you talk about the impact of the mobile initiative that you guys undertook, of the shift that you described?
Yeah, so for example, in 2017, our new team creation from organic mobile started to decline in Q3. And once we started the mobile initiative in 2018, when we compare the same time period, the team creation from organic mobile increased. And the trend correlates very closely to the timing of starting mobile paid. So we of course, correlation is not causation, but we've seen studies, like third-party studies, to show that each paid install results in about 1.5 additional organic installs, and our result is very similar to that finding. And at the same time, we observed a significant increase in our unique page views for App Store, and also downloads year over year. That correlates with the mobile paid mobile efforts, and also we've seen an increase in the retention and engagement for users who have both the desktop and mobile devices.
And we certainly are all aware of the kind of trajectory that Slack has been on just in the last couple of years. And this has been incredibly insightful, getting to see what happened behind the curtain of a lot of the mobile growth that really propelled some of the last couple of years of Slack's growth. Holly, this has been very instructive. Very honored to have had you on the Mobile User Acquisition Show. As we wrap, could you tell our listeners how they can find out more about you?
Yeah, feel free to follow me on Twitter. It's Holly NY, and I'm on LinkedIn as well. And looking forward to getting in touch and continue discussion. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you again, Holly. It's been a pleasure having you.
Same here. Thank you.
For more tips, pointers, and strategies from the leading edge of mobile user acquisition, subscribe to our YouTube channel right here, or check out our blog, rocketship.hq.com/blog. Thank you.